Starting this hour with a special guest, Mike Pence, former Vice President of the United States. And you think about what would be fair game to talk about, and it's like this. But this is Squawk Box, so we're like this. We got 20 minutes. We're not going to finish what I want to talk about, but most of it, we're going to stay in our lane in terms of money, spending, inflation, recessions. Does that sound good?
That's why we love Squawk Box. Good to see you, Joe.
Nice to see you.
Yeah,
thank you for coming in.
Thanks for and no Blazer. He's playing along with us
because we're going to solve.
We're roll up the sleeves.
We're going to work. It's a working breakfast. It's a working Squawk breakfast. The debt ceiling, front and center. Both sides seem to be entrenched. I understand both.
Oh, man.
Sides. I think during the Trump administration, Democrats voted for clean raises from time to time. They say, why not do that now? That's what the president wants. But I can see where Speaker.
Oh, yeah, in our house. I would love to see a great ticket against Joe Biden. But we'll just have to wait and see who comes out to announce. But I would think that 2028 is really when we're going to see a lot of just strong, new, vibrant campaigns, because taking down an incumbent is not easy. It just isn't. But we'll see what happens.
McCarthy says, when do we get a chance to really, focus on these huge debt issues that we have? Now is the time to do it, or we'll get another omnibus bill in December that we can't control. Who's right, and how does it get reconciled?
Well, I mean, the Constitution requires that we maintain the full faith and credit of the United States, and the Congress is going to figure that out. But I commend Speaker McCarthy for saying that we ought to make a down payment on fiscal discipline in a very real sense. Look, the issue is spending. As I travel all across this country, families are hurting. I mean, inflation ignited to a 40-year high after the Democrat Congress 2 years ago spent $1.9 trillion in unnecessary COVID spending, another trillion nearly at the end of that Democrat majority. So I'm glad to see the Republican majority saying we need to use this debt ceiling to start us back in the direction of fiscal discipline. But look, we all know where the real issue is in terms of long-term debt for the United States. And that is that while I respect the Speaker's commitment to take Social Security and Medicare off the table for the debt ceiling negotiations, we've got to put them on the table in the long term. And right now, President Biden's policy is insolvency. I mean, we're looking at a debt crisis in this country over the next 25 years that is driven by entitlements.
Bro, this dude has been talking about cutting social programs literally the entire 2.5 minutes that this clip has been going on. And then Republicans are like, how dare you suggest that we want to do this? Like, this has been the agenda for literally decades. Like, this is just Reaganism. That's all this is. Like, he's still going on about it.
And nobody in Washington, D.C. wants to talk about it. I've been going around the country. I'm going to continue to try and do my part.
Are you talking about
the American people?
What would you do about entitlements?
Well, I think first and foremost, you have to explain to people what's going on. We got a $32 trillion national debt right now, Andrew. Having a national debt the same size as our nation's economy is unsustainable. Last time that happened was right after World War
I don't disagree with you. I'm just curious, what's on the for you on entitlements, what's on the table?
Well, I think it begins with education. It begins with having the American people understand that it doesn't stop at 32 trillion. I mean, when you look at the deficits that are projected over the next 30 years in Social Security and Medicare and other areas, it's about another $120 trillion. I mean, literally, I just had 2 granddaughters born 2 weeks ago in 2 days. Our family's incredibly blessed. Looking down at those little girls, I think of their 30th year, we could have $150 trillion in debt in this country. And if we wait to deal with it,
would you means test Social Security? Would you? I mean, I think that when you get down to the the brass tacks. That's the complicated part.
Eventually,
That's why I said, what is on the table in terms of
you're
what
going to
you
have to do something eventually. But Jim Bullard just called it the third rail. How long has it been the third rail of American politics? It's always been the third rail. You have never seen two parties run for it more quickly than we just saw again. All President Biden has to say is they're going to do something with Social Security and Medicare, and then all of a sudden the Republicans get scared. Oh, no, we never would. So that's not helping anyone, and we're never going to address it.
Well, that's right.
There's an election every 2 years.
What you need is presidential leadership. And the fact is that President Biden is abdicating his opportunity to provide real leadership and say, first, Andrew, and I'm not dodging at all. There's lots of good ideas to solve this that are common sense, that don't impact people at the point of the need, that don't affect anybody that's going to retire in the next 25 years. I mean, you can phase in, just like Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill did 50
just like Ronald Reagan. Hold on, I got a few things to say.
50 years ago. They raised the retirement age to 67. They made Social Security solvent until 2009. There are things that you could do in personal savings accounts in the long term, allowing younger Americans to get a higher rate of return.
Literally, this entire the entire segment that Mike Pence had on CNBC was about cutting quote unquote entitlement programs. It was about cutting social programs. That is all he talked about this entire clip. Literally nothing else. And one of the things that I mentioned before is that, you know, this, as we know, has been one of the main pillars of the Republican movement in this country, especially ever since Ronald Reagan came about, in terms of really amplifying that message and bringing it back. Really, it's not like it was a new message, but really, you know, kind of shaping what the Republican Party is and still is today. And so, on the one hand, you know, you can talk about stuff like this on CNBC, right? Because, you know, for the most part, CNBC covers finance, they cover stocks, they cover things like that. So a lot of people who tune into this network either have a lot of money, or at least a healthy percentage of their clientele, their customer base, their audience. They're in the high upper class, they make a decent amount of money. Or they're kind of like gamblers and they're always looking at stock stuff and the new thing to invest in and things along those lines. So the rhetoric of cutting entitlement programs and the debt and the deficit, that sells well with that audience. But on the other hand, Donald Trump really took advantage of what a lot of people would, you know, call populism or populist rhetoric, or just I guess really a better way to say it, in my opinion, is just the working class struggle. He took advantage of that messaging and opened the Republican Party up more to, you know, maybe people who were former factory workers or laborers who were Democrat and they got completely abandoned in a variety of ways. Or just people generally looking for some type of assistance to make their lives better, whether it be cheaper medication, which Donald Trump ran on. And still to this day, Donald Trump, recently came out and told the Republicans not to go after Social Security and Medicare. Now, the thing is that ironically or unironically, however you want to look at it, is that Mike Pence and any other Republican who goes on to networks like this and talks about, we need to cut Social Security, we need to cut Medicare, they're just going to make Trump more popular. And that's the reality. Because if Donald Trump continues to say, no, fuck y'all, we're not going after Social Security and Medicare, he's going to, he already has the base that he has, but people's faith in other candidates will just dwindle away, because Donald Trump, again, he has the charisma and the personality and the energy. And I would, in a lot of ways, I would say the brutality, and by brutality, I mean, like, he'll get you, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you cross him, he'll get your ass, or if he feels like you cross him, he'll get your ass. So he's not really easy to deal with, especially with, weak corporate corrupt politicians who really are just there to collect a dollar at the end of the day. So anytime Mike Pence or anyone else goes on these networks and says stuff like this, they are going to boost Donald Trump's campaign. And this isn't going to stop. Again, like, you may have people like Tucker Carlson or other people in different networks saying speaking more to the middle class, but networks like CNBC are never going to stop spewing this rhetoric. Because at the end of the day, a huge portion of Republican support comes from very wealthy individuals who don't want to pay taxes. So they don't really care as much about a lot of the social issues. They just don't want to pay no damn taxes. So now, in regards to that, we're going to go ahead and talk about Sarah Palin because she went on Fox News and she said that Ron DeSantis should sit out of the 2024 presidential race, says he could run someday, but not right now. And, you know, we're not covering this because Sarah Palin is a genius. And no, of course not. But we're covering this because I think that a lot of people really understand this, especially people who work in politics, who spend time in any type of campaign. I think they understand that 2028 really is just a better year for both parties. It just any off race in terms of like if there's not an incumbent, you know, if he served their 2 terms, we haven't had a she yet. So if they've served 2 terms, that's when it's easiest for everybody to run a campaign because no house controls the executive branch. No, by house, I mean party, you know, the Democrats or the Republicans. Neither of them control the executive branches. But when an incumbent's running again, it's just simply harder to beat them. And unless they're extremely unpopular, they're almost certainly going to win re-election. So, you know, again, Ron DeSantis, if he's going to run in 2024, he has to run a very good campaign, especially to get across the finish line. If he doesn't run a good campaign, then it's not going to, you know, he'll still be Ron DeSantis, but he's not going to be as big of a lion in the Republican Party, at least not against Donald Trump. But if he doesn't run, then that also really won't look that good. It'll just look like, oh, I'm just giving it to Trump. You know, so it's just interesting how it's all roads lead back to Donald Trump in 2024 for the Republican Party in one way or another. You know, obviously, we still have to see what happens. Anything can happen. It's still quite some time before, you know, the primary elections really happen. However, you know, I just, Ron DeSantis is still very quiet. So what's he going to do? Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin, who has close ties to former President Donald Trump, does not think Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida should run for president in 2024, but would support him if he made a White House bid in the future. Now, again, one could point out that, well, she's a friend of Donald Trump. However, again, if Ron DeSantis really was like a sure bet and the right people just had all the confidence in the world that he was going to win, then Sarah Palin wouldn't say this. You know what I'm saying? So, again, and that's not to say that, oh, she's such a strategic genius, but this, I think people understand this more than they're letting on. That I think more people really kind of see that Ron DeSantis ain't gonna do shit against Donald Trump. DeSantis doesn't need to run. I envision him as our president someday, but not right now, Palin told Newsmax host Eric Bolling. He should stay governor for a bit longer. He's young, you know. He has decades ahead of him where he can be our president. Palin says she believes Trump, who endorsed her midterm campaign, has the best chance at winning the GOP nomination. When you talk about the specific campaign, the individual people who are looking at putting their hat in the ring, they got a lot of guts thinking they're going to go up against Trump, she told the outlet. And again, like, what are we seeing here? Division. You know what I'm saying? Nah, I don't believe that. I've seen people say that, but you know what I'm saying? Like, what are they really going to do? If the base is still behind him, if enough people in the base are still going to vote for him, then I mean, Republicans, what are they really going to do? Are they going to show up at his house and kidnap him? You know, unless he's locked up in prison, then Donald Trump is going to take advantage of the rhetoric being spewed in terms of cutting entitlement programs. But, you know, there's been a couple polls that say that Ron DeSantis, you know, is beating Trump. But at the end of the day, Ron has not run a presidential campaign. He hasn't started, and he barely beat a black man when he became governor for the first time in the state of Florida. He barely beat a black man in the state of Florida, so he didn't have a short grip on that. And Donald Trump really made his campaign in a lot of ways. So if DeSantis does not run an incredibly strong campaign, then it's just a bunch of hot air. He hasn't done anything yet. So again, we'll still have to see what happens. But until Ron DeSantis really shows and proves something, then it's still the Donald Trump show. And Donald Trump hasn't even started tweeting yet. He's gonna come. He's back on Twitter. He's unbanned, so he's gonna start tweeting. But when Ron DeSantis is like beep beep, he just looks like a weak loser, then Republicans aren't gonna flock to him in droves. So I just don't believe these people. I just flat out don't believe it. And again, I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong, but nah. Okay, but yeah, so that's really all I wanted to highlight this for. It was less about exactly what what does Palin think about the race, but just to show that there's still clear division in the party, and if the party doesn't fully back any other candidate. And Nikki Haley, too, as we covered before, she talking about, I'm not going to swipe sideways. I'm just focusing on Joe Biden. So it's like, no matter what, these people are going to kiss Donald Trump's ass. They're not really going to fight him. And if you don't really fight this guy, then you're not going to beat him. So I don't believe in these people's ability to really shut down Donald Trump. I just flat out don't believe in these people. Which isn't the worst thing, because Donald Trump really doesn't have the broad enough support to win a general election. So, but it's time for Ron DeSantis to show and prove. He's got to come out and really show us up.